I'm a sheriff's deputy in a fairly busy county, so we see and hear strange things all of the time, but this gives me the chills. There's an abandoned house in a rural area of the county that sits a good ways back into the woods. Every so often, our dispatch will receive a 911 call from a landline at the residence with nothing but white noise. The dispatchers ask if anyone is there, but they never get an answer. Since it's an open 911 call and we know the address, we have to respond, and every time we do, there is no one there. The oddest thing is there's no electricity or any signs of wiring going to the house. Every deputy that's been there gets a feeling of dread just being on the property. I'm not sure of the history of the house, so I don't know what could be there. Any thoughts on what it could be? I'm working in the zone of this house tonight, so I'll try and go by and snap a photo of the house if I can. Update. On the way to the property, I found a vehicle driving on the wrong side of the road, so I'm at the jail finishing paperwork on the DWI. I will post the pictures as soon as I can. At the least, it will be about 0800 Central Time. Update with photos and verification. The house. Verifying I'm a cop. Verifying the location. Got the best I could with the lighting. Update Part 2. I honestly did not expect to get this much attention. Thanks for all of the input and comments. To preface this part of this account, I consider myself to be pretty rational when it comes to odd situations, but I'm open to the idea of supernatural activity. I posted here because this is one of those cases I felt you all would enjoy on this sub and see if anyone might have any possible explanations or similar instances. Apparently there are a few stories out there very similar to mine. Not in it for the karma, just an interesting story I wanted to share. This was my first time walking up to the place, so it was definitely an experience. The trail is gated off, so I had to walk it. It's about 200 yards back into the woods through very dense brush and trees. There was nearly zero lum on the trail, and I really had to watch my step, even with my flashlight. I jumped a deer on the way up, and it scared the life out of me. Once I turned the corner at the end of the trail and saw the house, my heart started racing, and I honestly felt like something was there with me. I started messing with my flashlight, phone, and notepad, trying to get a good photo of the verification with the house when I felt that I needed to leave. It wasn't a feeling of I shouldn't be here, but more of a you need to get out of Dodge now. Having been in very stressful situations in the past, I have learned to trust that feeling. I got the best photos I could and sped walk back down the trail towards my car. I'm almost embarrassed to say that I legitimately felt something was following me. I made it back to the car and sat with my spotlight pointed at the trailhead, waiting to see if something would come out of the woods. Fortunately, nothing did. I sat for a minute and caught my breath while I reviewed the photos, hoping what I got was sufficient because I did not want to go back. I'm about to go off duty, so this is it for today. I'm really interested in what happened at this place, and I plan to do some research tomorrow. Sunday nights are usually extremely slow for us. November 25th, 2018, 7:05 p.m. Central Time. Update. I was able to obtain a few recordings of the calls from the house. Here's the SoundCloud playlist. Started an account just for you guys. Call 1. The short clip with white noise. Call 2. It's a long clip with white noise. The dispatcher I got it from said you can hear the dispatcher saying hello, but I wasn't able to hear it. 911 call 3. The female dispatcher saying 911 with white noise. 911 call 4. Male dispatcher saying 911 with more, just white noise. Update November 26, 2018, 2:35 a.m. Central. I've been doing some research between calls tonight, and I have some history on the property. The house was built in 1890, and the first deed on file was registered in 1901. The property has since been in possession of the same family that owns it today. From what I could find, the current owners of the property live out of state now, but had previously lived either in the house or on the property some years back. The area it's in was a boom town during the late 1800s, but fizzled out shortly afterwards due to lack of profits from the mines. Other than that, I haven't found anything that makes the property stand out. On a more speculative note, the house sits close to an area where a Native American tribe was known to reside. I will dig deeper into the history of the property and the family and see what I can find. Thanks again for all the comments and advice. It really is appreciated. Update November 27th, 2018, 7:36 p.m. Central. Sorry for the lack of updates. I've been spending time with the family the past couple of days and I haven't gotten much done. I have the name of the person who has the deed to the property, but contacting them has been a bit of a task. I plan to go back to the house tomorrow during the day, so more photos will follow. December 7th, 2018 at 7:55 p.m. So sorry for the long wait, but from the last time that I posted an update till today, I've been debating on whether or not to go back to the house. I've been in contact with a medium who I located in the comments on the original post, as well as a few private messages. Her input on the whole situation was both enlightening and honestly a little unnerving for someone like me who is not accustomed to such things. She told me she was in communication with an older man, a farmer who resided in the house in the 50s and remains to this day in spirit form. She told me that he does not wish to move on from the house because he likes the seclusion. The reason for the 911 calls was unknown to her, but said the farmer wanted them to stop so we could leave him in peace. She told me that he made people feel unwelcome at the house for the sole purpose of deterring any trespassers, but would allow me a short visit on the condition that I bring a pack of cigarettes for him. However, she warned me not to overstay my welcome. More than a little skeptical, I considered the input but was convinced of the communication in a follow-up message I got from her. She described the counter next to the door and told me that is where he wanted the cigarettes left. She also brought up an old convenience store several miles from the house. Without knowledge of the area or the house, there would be no way of knowing these details. After discussing the matter with my wife and a few close friends, I put the investigation on hold to kind of get my bearings about the whole ordeal. Today, I finally decided to return. I got up earlier than usual and got dressed for work. I got in my patrol car and drove 30 minutes out to where the convenience store was. I went in and purchased a pack for regular Newports and drove to where the trail to the house begins. Being daytime this time around, I felt a little more secure but still had the nervousness about me considering the situation. I stopped a short way down the trail and addressed the farmer. I introduced myself and asked for permission to come onto his land for a short while, and added that I brought a pack of cigarettes as a show of good faith. I stood for a second and listened, half expecting a verbal response. I did not hear a voice, but the tension that I had felt prior to addressing the man seemed to dissipate. I continued to the house and gave it a good once-over, and it did not look any different from when I had last left it. I took several photos of the front of the house and walked towards the open door. I addressed the farmer again and told him I was going to place the cigarettes where he had asked and said I was going to take a few pictures. As you can probably tell from the photos, the interior of the house was a little more than just spooky. I placed the cigarettes on the counter and walked into the kitchen area where I noticed something in the corner. I shined my light and saw a very old photograph of a woman sitting on the shelf by itself. The rest of the house was mostly empty, so it seemed like the photo was deliberately placed and left on the shelf. On the kitchen floor, I found an old phone laying in a pile of trash. I chuckled a little at the irony of it, then began looking for any connections. The ones that I found had been severed, but that's not to say there aren't any underground lines that could be causing the issue. When I rounded the corner, I saw the stairs leading up to the second floor. No way was the first thing that crossed my mind, and I moved on to the living room. I had been in the house for close to 10 minutes at this point, and I started to feel the tension I had felt before returning. I walked through the living room through a passageway that led behind the stairs. As I turned the corner towards the back room, I heard 3 loud and distinct footsteps directly above my head, as if someone was on the second floor landing of the stairs. Either I had overstayed my welcome or there was something in the back room I was not supposed to see, but I was not about to stick around to find out. I quickly exited the house and began walking down the trail towards my car. As I was leaving, I began to take a photo of the second-story window in hopes of catching something. I took the picture and walked back to my unit and realized I did not feel the presence behind me as I did the first time. When I got to the end of the road, there was a car parked beside my unit with a lady in the driver's seat. When she saw me, I waved and she got out of the car to meet me. She was a resident of the area and wanted to make sure everything was okay. I told her I was just checking the property as an extra patrol due to the 911 calls we had received. I didn't think my supervisors would appreciate me telling a citizen that I was ghost hunting, even though I was not on the clock. When asked if she knew anything about the property, she said she only knew the owners live out of state and that no one is ever there. She did tell me that she had been in the house before and began talking about the cellar in the back room of the house behind the stairs. And given what had just happened, this piqued my interest. She said the rumor around the community is that there is a bear that lives in the cellar due to loud noises coming from inside, but no one knew for certain. I thanked her for her time and went to the office where I started to work on this update. To answer the question, I know I will get, no, I will not go back to search the cellar. Whether there be a spirit of an old farmer in the house or something else, I am not wanted there and I don't intend to push my luck. The trail on info of the house has went cold and I haven't found any way of contacting the current owners or their family. We haven't received any more calls to the house and frankly, I hope we never get one again. Thanks to those who have stuck with me on the story. I'm happy to answer any questions y'all might have, just don't ask me to go back. Update December 8th, 2018, 3:05 p.m. I'm going back. Not out of guilt or a sense of duty, but because y'all have made me realize this is something that I have to do for personal reasons. To clarify, here's a little background on me. My first supernatural experience occurred when I was 16. I was, as I was told, a demonic possession. I posted the story here a few days ago if you want the full story titled, We Are Rage. This experience gave me both an extreme aversion to the paranormal and a keen curiosity. I've always been one to take interest in things that frighten me. I've been involved in some pretty hairy situations over the past 5 years in the line of duty. And more than a few of those, my chances for survival were objectively very slim. I've seen stuff that would put snuff films to shame. But all in all, these things are normal for first responders and we do the job because we know we can deal with the stuff and carry on about our lives. All that being said, for some reason this situation is stripping me of my years of dealing with fear and putting me back in my 16-year-old self in Central America, watching a man be tortured by a supernatural being. This is something I have to confront if I want closure on this thing. Do I believe there's some sort of Scooby-Doo-esque cover-up for a horrible crime? Very unlikely, but as you guys said, it's my duty to check it out. So I'm going back. And y'all better believe if I get the revenant treatment from a bear in that house, I'm going to haunt you all. Update December 12th, 2018, 5:20 p.m. I apologize for this post being down so long. I'm not sure what the issue is. I felt I needed to repost this due to it being down for several days and a few concerned private messages I received from a few of y'all. Thanks for checking in on me, by the way. I haven't been back to the house yet. I've asked a close friend of mine, another deputy, to go with me, and he's all for it, so we will be going back to check out the cellar when we are both available to go. To answer a few more questions I've gotten, no, there isn't an active criminal investigation as a result of any of my findings. Yes, my encounter with a supposed demon possession is completely factual, and nothing was embellished. I'm not sure if the 3 steps I heard in the house were indicative of a demonic presence. Thanks for the continued interest in this investigation. I'll post as soon as I have more to tell. I went back by myself to close this thing once and for all. The trip to the trail, the walk to the house, and the investigation inside the house happened without anything of note occurring. The cellar wound up being a shallow root cellar which was empty save for cobwebs and a pile of very old Pepsi cans. No sign of any human trafficking, drug smuggling, or any Black Snake Moan type stuff. Just an empty old house with a lot of family and local history. The footsteps didn't return, nor did I come across anything supernatural this time. It's as if whatever was there before had went away or at least didn't bother to make itself known while I was there. The cigarettes remained unopened on the shelf next to the door, and the phone and photo remained in the same spot as I had left them. I dug a little deeper into the current owner's information and found an email for them. I sent them a message asking about the history of the house under the guise of a study into the history of the area. It's been a week since I've sent it and no response. I'm sorry that I didn't take any photos of the cellar, but there wasn't really anything there to see. Just a small door in the corner which opened to a somewhat disappointing small storage area. Thank you all for the continued interest into this investigation, the support and input that was given. It really was appreciated. If I encounter anything of a paranormal or unexplained nature in the future, you guys will be the first to know. About a week ago, a dispatcher who had answered multiple calls from the residents did a ride along with me and talked me into taking him to the house. I had read every post I had made here, so he was up to date with the latest spooky stuff going on there. Wanting to see some creepy stuff, as he put it, we waited till around 3 a.m. before going. At first I was going to walk him to the front of the house, take a look, then head back. That wasn't enough for him. We walked up to the porch and saw old hymnals laying open on the floor just outside of the front porch, which hadn't been there the last time I was there. Walking into the house, I checked the spot where I had put the pack of cigarettes. They were still there, unopened, covered in dust, and in the exact same place that I had left them. Having someone there with me, I started to feel a little brave, so I tried to recreate the circumstances when I heard the footsteps upstairs. I walked under the stairs and into the back room, and nada. I showed him the stairs in which I didn't want to go up, and wouldn't you know it, we climbed up. There were old newspapers all over the floor. A very old mattress was on the floor, which was folded over itself in the master bedroom. It looked like it was covering something. We flipped it over, and to our relief, there wasn't anything under it. A few seconds after, the creepy stuff began. Downstairs, we heard a very loud noise. It sounded like someone had a large stick and was dragging it across the wall. I'm not sure how long it lasted, but it felt like an unnaturally long time. We looked at each other, and I could tell by his expression that we had heard the same thing. We went back downstairs and looked in each room but found nothing that could have made the sound. We checked around the house thinking there might have been a limb that had fallen. Again, nothing that could have made the sound. Deciding that we had enough paranormal activity for the night, we started walking back down the trail. Just like my first visit, I felt something was following us. Before I could say anything, I saw the dispatcher quickly look behind. He said he felt like someone was behind us. I don't know why I keep going back. I feel like if I keep antagonizing whatever is there, it's going to be a bad day. I know in previous discussions everything from demons to squatters has been proposed, but with everything that's happened up to this point, it's getting harder and harder to dismiss the supernatural. I work the 4 p.m. to 12 a.m. shift. The cemetery generally closed at 6 p.m., so around 5:30, I would lock the main gate, then would start driving through the cemetery to notify any visitors that we'd be closing soon. I'd instruct them to park in a line in front of the locked main gate, and when my drive through the grounds was complete, I would unlock the main gate. Everyone would leave, and I would lock the gate behind them. So one day I'm in the middle of my final drive-through and see an old lady slowly walking the sidewalk alongside a mausoleum. The mausoleum was hundreds of feet long, about 20 feet tall, and had no breaks in it. It was one long stretch. The road ran directly alongside the sidewalk of the mausoleum, so I pulled up behind the lady to tell her we're closing, got out of my car, take my eyes off of her for a split second as I'm getting out of the car, and when I shut the door and look up, she's gone. Completely vanished. I didn't think anything paranormal at first. I just thought maybe I lost sight of her. But the sidewalk and road were completely empty. I ran all the way around to check the back of the mausoleum, but no one was there. Across from the mausoleum was a whole field of graves, and I eagle-eyed every row. Not a soul in sight. I finish up my roundup and sit in my car the rest of the night, in a well-lit area. I saw a fully visible person. I know it. No tricks of light, no hallucination, plain as day. This encounter seemed to break open the proverbial dam because after this I had numerous unexplainable occurrences. If you guys like to hear any of those, I'd gladly update the post with another few stories. Update with some more of the stories. Number 1, normally my then girlfriend, now my wife, would drop by around 8 p.m. and bring me dinner since I couldn't really leave. I never told her my experiences because I didn't want to freak her out. As I'm walking her back to her car to leave, I see her reach back and touch her ponytail, then look around with a look on her face. I asked her what's wrong, and she says, "Nothing. I must have got my ponytail caught in a tree branch, or I felt something." So I pointed out to her that the closest tree was 20 feet away, and that's impossible. Then she gets really pale and says it felt like someone ran their hand through her hair, front to back, and then pulled on the ponytail. We were both pretty freaked out, and she left. She never came and never brought me dinner again. Number 2, I was originally hired because the cemetery had a period of time where they experienced some grave robbers and people breaking in to perform satanic rituals. I was 21 years old, doing this as a side job with no gun, no weapons or anything like that. I was given a barcode scanner and was told to drive through the entire cemetery every hour or so to patrol, and to scan each of the pre-posted barcodes to prove I was actually doing it. Now, this cemetery was massive, pretty much broken into 3 parts: the newer part, the historic part, and the famous part where celebrities and other famous people are buried. I did this routine once and never did it again, going so far as to break the barcode scanner, so I didn't have to do it. While I was driving, it was pitch black. Coming around a long curved road, my headlights picked up what I could have sworn were a pair of legs walking across the path, but only up to the knee. Shoes, pants, knee, then absolutely nothing. I stopped dead in the road and just watched this pair of legs with no body cross the road 10 feet in front of me. I put the car in reverse and did what felt like the longest K-turn of my life and got straight back to the parking lot. Other quick things were lesser experiences of just hearing strange noises and seeing floating lights in the cemetery after I know for sure everyone was gone. Weird animal sounds that I couldn't recognize. I'm a bit busy now, but in a few hours I'll post the last story, which is one that pretty much convinced me to quit. Update 2. I'll make this the last of it, but I could write for hours. 1. The guy who worked the day shift there, which was 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., was a grimy dude. We'll call him Bart. Part of his job was to go around the cemetery and check the graves for personal affects left by family members and remove them. Many people left things like toys for children who had passed away, birthday cards, mementos, etc. I personally hated this policy and refused to enforce it. Who was I to take a dead child's toy fire engine and throw it away? But Bart had the habit of scouring the cemetery for things he deemed valuable and would take them home, instead of throwing them away or bringing them to the office to be picked up by the family. In the short time I worked there, Bart's mental state deteriorated. He started spending hours there, even after his shift was over, walking around the cemetery and drinking heavily. He seemed detached and even more out there than when I had first met him. When I didn't see him for a few weeks or so, I asked about him, and my boss said he just no-call, no-showed and never heard from him again. I often wondered if he developed some type of attachment from bringing so many objects home he shouldn't have. 2. Lastly, the experience that led me to quitting. Once Bart stopped showing up, I picked up his Saturday morning shift. It was a quiet day, so I pulled my car around the back of the old chapel to take a nap. The chapel was surrounded by 12-foot-high hedges, so I figured it was a good spot to park for an hour and shut my eyes. I fell asleep and wake up to see my car completely surrounded by dead people. So real, so vivid, so much detail. They were all pressed up against the glass and windshield. They had on the outfits they were buried in, suits, dresses, but all dirty and in different stages of decomposition. No one spoke, no one moved. They all just stared like I was some zoo exhibit. Then I woke up. I'd been asleep and it was a dream. The thing is, it felt so real. I had never had a dream so real, so vivid before or after. I took it as a message. I called my boss and quit as soon as I left at 4 p.m. I go back to that cemetery from time to time because I have 3 grandparents and an aunt buried there. I never linger too long, and always make sure I'm out long before it gets dark. October 2018. I was driving home from teaching music lessons one night, around 9:45 on the highway. Suddenly this memory comes to me. Before my family moved to Atlanta, I lived in Kennesaw, Georgia. It's really not too far from the city, but far enough to feel suburban. My neighborhood there was really just in the middle of a giant forest, miles between us and the nearest residential development. I was raised by a single mother. Her work schedule was harsh, so she had arranged since kindergarten a babysitting gig with my neighbor, whose son Mike was the same age as me. We basically grew up as brothers, me arriving at his house around 7 a.m., going to school together, and hanging after school every day until 7 p.m. In the summer, with no school, we had eons together. His mom was pretty lax and would let us go do whatever for the whole day. We often spent our days exploring the outer woods of our neighborhood, choosing this direction or that, going as far as we could before we knew it was time to come back. The land was wild, woods and creeks and little waterfalls. Copperheads and water moccasins, our biggest fear. We'd come home for Capri Sun refuels covered in mud, and Mike's mom would hose us down. So as I'm driving last October, I'm thinking of this house I just taught a lesson at, an upper-class family. They had decked their house out with Halloween decorations. I was thinking how strange it is that we do that, and thinking why humans are so connected to the idea of the dead. On the highway, really in an instant, this memory just pops back, almost like watching a movie. Mike and I are 8, second grade, way back in the woods. The land had gotten weird, almost marshy. I remember packs of moss floating on slow-moving water. No trail back there, we just walked. We'd found what we thought to be some kind of island in the marsh, solid land when the rest was muddy and sometimes like a pond. We were sitting on the bank of this island, used to play games where leaves were planets and we'd tear holes in them and pretend they were asteroid impacts or bombs gone off. So we're chilling there and doing that kind of stuff when, all of a sudden, out of the straight brush, this man pops out. The best way I can describe him is Abraham Lincoln style. He's wearing a tux kind of getup, black and white, but the coat tail is divided into two skinny tube shapes that drift down to the back of his knees. He wears a top hat like Abe, not super huge, but big enough to give a kind of silly feel. Odd for us to see, at least. He is smiling and his presence is super gentle. He walks straight over to us. The way he came was a dry stretch, not from the wetter side of our little island. I remember seeing him purposely step around mud spots. He stopped right in front of us, just looking down. We were sitting like the posture of sitting on a curb. He said, "Don't mind me, boys. Just passing along." Then he briskly walked off and back into the woods. I recall us being scared, but not seriously. Kind of like, what was he doing here? What was he wearing? That was weird. We didn't take off running or anything. So this vivid memory pops back into my head on the highway. I'm like, no way. And I call my girlfriend and tell her exactly what I recalled. She responds kind of like I'm telling a dream, like, oh, weird, crazy. But I'm like, yo, I gotta reach out to Mike about this and see if he remembers it. We'd lost touch hard, staying close for a while after I moved into Midtown Atlanta, but eventually fading away. He has a daughter now, and this was 20 years ago. I get home around 10:15 or so. I'm watching some YouTube video on my bed with my cat and browsing Reddit and just generally end-of-the-night phone stuff. I open Instagram. I've got a few accounts. One banned, one for memes, one for work, and one personal. When I switched to my personal account, I got a DM. It's for Mike. This man had DM'd me at 9:49 p.m. "Hey bro, do you remember when we were way back in that swamp and the man in the top hat came up to us?" I got chills. I was like, alright, what's going on? Crazy thing is that it's been a dramatic year in terms of my perception in the world. I was a hardcore, argumentative atheist since my teens, but over the last year and a half, I had just been open-minded and realized I have no clue what's going on just in general. Michael and I talked for over an hour, in detail about everything we could remember. He had been laying in bed when it came to him, same time as I when I was driving. We remember everything the same. He reminded me of exactly the way we'd come from this boy Nick's house. It wasn't a malicious thing for me. It was just a reminder that I'm just so unsure of what this world is all about. To preface this happened a little while back and we haven't had any issues since, but it kind of bothered me. We live in an apartment complex area that has been known to have some hauntings in the area. The area was built on a Chinese prisoner of war camp where a lot of people died along with some old samurai battlegrounds. I have not had any paranormal experiences before this point. My wife has had some weird stuff go on in her life before, and our friend has wanted to experience something, so we invited her over and decided to do some spooky stuff at 2 a.m. It was my wife and our friends sitting on the couch doing their own thing, chanting, calling out, typical horror movie white people stuff, and I was sitting in a chair across from them watching. After a couple of minutes of sitting in the chair, I felt a weird presence and saw a flash of a Japanese kabuki, the white mask with red markings, and a very loud female scream. Think female horror movie off in the distance of the haunted house type. I shook it off, thinking my nerves were getting the better of me. Late at night, lights out, trying to be spooky, and continue to watch my wife and buddy. After a couple of minutes go by, I feel like someone lightly pushes on the back of my head. Then the image of the mask and same scream flash into my head. At this point, I'm freaked out a little. 2 times could still be a coincidence, right? Then after another minute or so, I feel like I'm blacking out. My vision narrows and I feel the same presence much stronger, almost like hands in my head. The same mask and scream flash in my mind. I decided enough is enough and turn on the lights and say I'm done. Both my wife and Buddy turned to me and asked how long I had been standing before I turned the lights on. I asked why because I had just gotten up. They said they thought I stood up about 10 minutes prior and that there was a black shadow figure standing directly where I was sitting. We wrapped up for the night and didn't think about it for a couple of days until my wife started having sleep paralysis. She described a lady, long black hair with a mask that had red markings, that came into our room and just stared at her for a long time, then vanished. Mind you, I hadn't told her about the mask or why I had said I was done with our spooky outing. Over the next couple of weeks, she'd see her either through sleep paralysis or out of the corner of her eye. It really unnerved us. We spread salt, looked into banishing spirits in the house, a bunch of different Japanese rituals we could do. None of it really helped. It all stopped, though, after we started talking about having a kid and starting a family. All of a sudden, no more sleep paralysis, no more weird feelings in the house, no nothing. We looked a little more into the area and found out that the children around the area have described a nice lady that they play with and protects them. Stops kids before they run into the street and get hit by a car. Keeps them away from the hornet nests and centipedes. Plays games and sings to them. We're not sure who she was, but it sounds like the same lady to us, maybe. Anyone else have any thoughts on the matter? Listen, I'm a skeptic. I've been a lawyer for the past 10 years, and I'm about 2/3 of the way from being a licensed clinical psychologist in my home state. I understand Occam's razor and how simple explanations are normally best. I also know how impressionable people's minds can be, especially when disturbed or stressed. However, my family and I are having an issue, and I just have no rational way to deal with it, so I'm looking for some advice. I'll premise this all with the following. We've lived in this rental for the past 14 months and have not had one single negative issue other than having to confront a neighbor or two about loud music. Now, I don't even know if I currently believe in anything involving the supernatural or even anything religious-oriented. I have in the past, but not necessarily now. That being said, I have an open mind. Nothing has happened here until yesterday. I'm a big gamer in my spare time, which is not very often with a 3-year-old and a pregnant wife. Yesterday, I bought Resident Evil 7 for the PSVR, and there has been just strange stuff happening ever since. I bought it yesterday around lunchtime and then came home from GameStop. I had to leave again to get my car into the shop for some repairs. I left the game at home while I was out and the family stayed. When I returned home, my wife was on the living room floor, crying. My daughter was fine, but my wife asked why I hadn't responded to my phone. Apparently, while I was out, she and my daughter were watching videos on the laptop in her bedroom when they both heard a gigantic bang in the living room. We had a gliding chair we initially used for getting our daughter to sleep when she was a baby. The chair had somehow fallen forward, toward the direction of the entertainment center with my consoles, etc. There's just no way this chair would be able to fall forward like that for no reason. No way. I tried to reason with my wife about it and come up with some kind of explanation. I thought my daughter may have positioned it in a funny way and it just fell. Regardless, I wrote it off, but last night I was playing Resident Evil 7 late and heard my coffee pot making its usual noises. Now I had coffee way earlier in the day, but hadn't for some 10 hours or so. Our coffee pot turns off by itself unless you manually turn it back on, and then it will just stay on until turned off again, I think. I absolutely did not turn it back on again. I was just sitting there playing with the VR goggles and then it was on. Still, I tried to chalk it up to maybe one of us accidentally turning it on, which is a stretch. Today we left for a family outing and I was the last one out of the house. I for sure turned off all the lights as I'm a stickler about such things. I know they were all off when I left. Then, when we got home this evening, the living room light was on, and all of those so-called occurrences are just really messing with us tonight. I have an unborn child and daughter. I hate to move, but I don't want my family in danger. I threw out Resident Evil 7 at my wife's request a few hours ago, but this is all messing with me very badly. The game is in the garbage bin out on the street. Could it be the object? Is it the house? Is it all a great big coincidence? Or is it something attracted to one of us? I don't even know if I believe in these things, but I do know enough has happened to make me write this, so anybody's input would be immensely and wholeheartedly appreciated. So this all began when my friend, we'll call M, moved into a new house south of town. The house was built sometime in the early 1900s and has a very strange layout, especially in the basement. M moved there during the summer, so all of our friends were free to hang out in the new house. It was a normal boys' night with us just screwing around and playing stupid games. At one point, around 2 in the morning, a few of us decided to play Ghost in the Graveyard in the extremely creepy basement. The others would not because they were saying they felt very uneasy and got negative energy from the basement. So the game commenced with the ones who were willing to play. I was seeking first. While I was searching, I had walked into a room and I instantly had a sick feeling in my gut, but I continued to walk deeper in. I bumped into a table and bruised my hip, so I didn't want to continue any further, in fear of hurting myself in the scary darkness again. As I proceeded to turn around, I felt someone grab my calf and pull my leg back towards the back of the room. I jumped, whipped out my phone, turned my flashlight on, and shone it to the back of the room. No one in sight. I then heard a knocking and I called to one of the boys upstairs to turn on the lights. The switch at the top of the stairs can control all lights downstairs, and I then called out to everyone that they had to come out. I told them what happened, and all of them said they felt strange things as well. My friend C said that he had felt someone touch his back as if they were trying to get his attention. M said he was hearing someone whisper to him, but he didn't recognize the voice. The 2 others that were down there, T and W, were hiding in a closet together, and they both heard a third person breathing in the closet. We're all very spooked at this point and run upstairs ASAP. We tell the others what had happened, and then they told us something that spooked us even more. My friend M has 3 big dogs that have no fear to anything whatsoever, or so we thought. While we were playing our game, the dogs were growling at the basement door, and when there was a knock heard from upstairs, the dogs started to cry and retreat into the living room. After experiencing this, we decided it'd be best to spend the rest of the night upstairs and away from the basement door. Fast forward to the next night. I'm home alone sitting in the living room with my dog, Abby. Abby and I are sitting on the floor in front of the TV watching whatever, and when I start telling my girlfriend about what happened, Abby gets up into her fighting stance. Try to imagine the cutest and beefy tricolored Aussie, and gets low, low, low to the ground. She begins to growl into the kitchen. Then all of a sudden we both hear a thud. Abby begins to cry and runs behind me. I get up and walk into the kitchen to see nothing. Ever since then, I have not felt alone in my house when it's only me and my dog. It will feel sometimes very heavy, and it will get cold fast randomly, and there's an occasional smell in the living room super late at night that was never there before. Sometimes when in my room, I'll hear creaks in the hallway like someone's walking through it, or things from the room next to me which has nothing in it. But there's always that occasional dull thud in the middle of the night, and it's almost always followed up by the sound of Abby's pattering and whimpers coming closer to my door. But I have to admit, I'm not entirely sure it's Abby all the time, mainly because I know she's not as heavy as the pattering sounds make it seem sometimes, and she sure does not have the same deep breathing I hear from outside my door. My sister bought a house about 2 years ago and moved my parents and I in with her and her boyfriend. The property is a little over an acre with 2 houses on the property. We live in the house we called the Blue House. It was the largest house in the lot and the newest, having never had anyone else live in it. At least, I think so. Maybe there had been one other. The other house was on the lot we would call the Red House. Obviously, the houses were named these due to their colors. The Red House was not new at all. I believe it was built in the 80s, possibly. Not entirely sure. I'd have to ask my sister later. No one lived in it for the most part. There was no kitchen in it, and we mainly just used it to play airsoft in until we rented out to some friends. Prior to them moving in, we had several paranormal experiences in that house. I do not remember the exact order that these happened in, but here's what happened. One day, my sister, we'll call her A, was pulling out of the driveway to go do some errands. Her boyfriend, we'll call him T, was getting the gate for her, as there was a fence in between the 2 houses for our dogs. T didn't notice anything, but A told me she glanced towards the Red House and saw a dark figure of a man in the window. She looked ahead before she had even processed it, and when she looked back, it was gone. Let me remind you that this was before her friends moved in, so no one was in the house. I was at school and my parents were in their room. In several other instances, we would hear footsteps or little kids running down the hallway and giggling. On one occasion, I was playing airsoft with T and a couple of his friends. We were in teams of 2 and I was on T's team. I just followed him as it was one of my first real games and I'm not the best at tactics. We were crouched down under a window trying to find the other 2. I was wearing a tactical vest for ammo and protection, but it didn't weigh much at all, maybe a little heavier than a normal t-shirt. Suddenly, the weight nearly tripled. I legitimately felt like there was a person on my back, putting all their weight on me, like I was giving someone a piggyback ride. T turned the corner and shot one of them, while I followed suit and shot the other. I managed to stand and took about 4 steps before the weight vanished. I'm not sure what was in the Red House, but that wasn't the only house haunted. The Blue House was too. Maybe not as much, but definitely there. Something I experienced a lot was that I would stay up late, 3 to 4 a.m., and almost every night, if I listened closely, I could hear what sounded like a music box. At the time, my brother and sister-in-law were staying in the room next to mine, so I just assumed that it was one of their kids' toys and brushed it off. Until they moved out and my other brother moved into the same room. It continued. Another reoccurring thing would be my door opening right around the same time of night, but that was only once in a few months or so. Another incident involving my door, I had gone to school one day and T told me he was with A playing video games when he heard my door slam shut. He assumed I hadn't gone to school, as I don't go a lot, and he got up to go and yell at me for staying home when he saw that I wasn't there. As I had stated, I went to school that day. Other than that, there was mainly just little things. You know, stuff moving, weird noises. The worst thing the ghost in the Blue House did actually did scare me quite a bit. We had begun calling what we assumed was a male spirit, Jeffrey. It was a joke really, but this led us to believe he or she didn't like his name. They had one of those little metal things that you put on your doors so you have a coat hanger on the back of your door, and on it she had a big black sweater. One morning she went to put it on when she saw the sweater ripped to shreds. It wasn't completely ripped, just ripped in certain parts as if giant claws had ripped it. Of course, at first we were quite surprised. Our first thoughts were that her cats had done this, but we quickly thought that if a cat could cut it, then we could rip it, right? My mom, A, T, and I all attempted to rip it to no avail. We quickly put together that it must have been Jeffrey. Both houses burnt down in the campfire. Since then, we've been staying with T's ex-coworkers in their home. A has said that she has heard stuff move and seen stuff move just like that before, And just last night, a box I had nearby my computer fell right off the table. It had been there for weeks and no one had touched it at all. This spirit even followed me all the way to Anaheim, where I went for a school trip. I was staying in a hotel room with 3 other girls, and throughout the night we heard and saw stuff being moved. So, that's the story of our paranormal experiences. I'll update if anything more happens. Feel free to comment whether or not you think Jeffrey is a good or evil spirit, or what you think I should do to see if this is all legit. I moved into a new apartment in July 2018 with both of my parents. Since I am in college, I don't have the time nor the money to live on my own. Prior to that, we lived in another city for my last year of high school, and before that, I was living in the countryside for the first 16 years of my life. Now I am 17. I am Canadian. Our school system is different from the USA's. Had I been American, I would still be in high school, but Canadians typically finished high school at 16. I have posted previous stories of my paranormal experiences. None of them ever happened at the same place. Some of them happened at different times, and overall, it became a part of my life. On my first move, I had only experienced 2 paranormal events, each scaring me for a little while. Whenever I was in that apartment, I felt uneasy, watched. The first one happened when I was in my bedroom, sitting very close to my bed's corner so I could read under my lamp's light. That happened maybe 3 months before we moved. My bed is a bunk bed, but I use the second bed for storage. There isn't even a mattress, it's just cardboard boxes filled with miscellaneous items. One thing I can assure, all the items are either really big or they are clothes. By big, I mean books, shoes, etc. Things that have weight. Well, as I am reading, I felt what felt like either somebody letting themselves fall to sit on the corner I was close to, or something particularly heavy falling on that corner. No, I jolt up, heart racing, going, "What was that?" And I'm looking everywhere for what might have fallen, but there's nothing on the floor. And after thinking about it for a little while, I didn't hear anything falling on the ground. After I searched everywhere, I simply closed the lights and went to bed. Fast forward a month before moving. I wake up at 3 a.m., my bed shaking up and down, not side to side. It stopped a few seconds after I woke up. I grab my phone, look at the time, see what time it is, put it down, thinking, what was that? How can a bed even do that? I live near Montreal. My region has never had any earthquakes, and it couldn't have been a dream because it woke me up and continued after I woke up. After that, there were a few things, but truly minor. Things being one place at night when I go to bed and being out of place in the morning, curtains moving during the night, etc. Nothing too noticeable. After we moved, nothing happened. Until January this year. Before we moved, a very old lady lived in our apartment and she passed away weeks before we moved. Her descendants never came to take her belongings, so the owners had thrown them away. Her car is still parked where her parking spot was, untouched. It's a thought that saddens me, thinking that all I owned is trash, and the only thing that interests my children is my money. My mom kept the few belongings that remained in the apartment, which is the shower rings and 2 pairs of curtains, one in my bedroom and the others on the front door. As soon as I stepped in our new apartment, I felt a sensation of peace, calm, and empathy. I saw the lady only once, and she was super sweet. Nothing happened for the first few months. I guess that the moving stress made me numb, so I didn't feel her around as much as I do now. But now she became a part of my life. In the morning before I leave, she will help me remember to bring everything I need to school. When I come home, when nobody is home, I can smell the same perfume that drenched the apartment when we visited. A strong, powerful smell of flowers. At night, I put a chair in the corner of my bedroom and I can almost see her watching over my sleep. She manifested herself only twice. The first step, My stepdad and my mother are in the living room watching TV while I am in the bathroom doing whatever. The house is set up so that the living room is in front of the two doors that lead to our apartment, and there's a wall separating the kitchen from the living room. If someone cooks, you can only smell whatever they're cooking. You can't see them. And from the kitchen, you can access this small hallway that connects at the end of the bathroom and the two bedrooms. From the bathroom, I can directly see my parents' bedroom, but not mine. They always keep their door closed because my stepdad is allergic to the cat. My door is always open. Well, as I am doing whatever, I can hear my parents' bedroom door handle rattle. I turn, expecting my mom or stepdad going out of the bedroom, but all I see is the door handle moving, and I hear my parents chatting in the living room. I'm standing, shocked, until it suddenly stopped like it began. I didn't tell anybody about this. 2 weeks ago, I was once again in the bathroom washing my hands when I felt someone pull on my shirt. I knew somebody was behind me. Surely my mom, as she was getting prepared for her night, and stepdad was away at work. But when I turned, there was nobody. I tried to repeat the situation several times by repeating the moves I did when washing my hands, but nothing felt the same until I pulled on my own shirt with my hand. Now, I'd like to preface this with, yes, I know a lot of this probably sounds really outlandish, and who would really believe a 17-year-old posting to Reddit, but hear me out. And to be completely honest, I don't even know if this is really the right subreddit to be posting this in, but it was the first thing that came to mind when I felt like I needed to say something about it. When I was little, I used to, for some reason, confidently say that I wouldn't make it past the age of 20. Not just around that age, but specifically 20. That along with the fact that I also said that I just wouldn't be able to have kids. I mean, I really had no reason to. What 8-year-old just says things like that and genuinely feels it's real? Kids don't think about that kind of stuff. I remember being so casual about it too. Just not thinking much of it, I was a kid. I hadn't grasped what death really meant at that time. The years go by, I hadn't really thought about it, just going about life, dealing with the ups and downs. Yesterday, however, something really set off a red flag for me. I was just sitting in my bed, minding my own business. I had just gotten off a FaceTime call with one of my best friends, and as I was sitting there, I got this sudden thought in my head, almost as if somebody was trying to tell me something, saying that I was going to pass at the age of 19. So of course I sit there, crying a bit, absolutely terrified of what just happened. Now, normally stuff like this wouldn't exactly be anything to particularly worry about, but the fact that it fits so perfectly with something I used to take as a fact as a kid really made me question it. Another thing that really sent chills down my spine is that sometimes I get this feeling that things are just going to happen. Feel free to call me crazy or take it as me misinterpreting some sort of normal feeling people are supposed to have, but I'll get this feeling sometimes when I'm doing things that it has to be done a certain way. I don't mean like I need to measure this correctly or it won't look right. I mean that if I don't do what it's telling me, things won't turn out how they're supposed to and things are going to go wrong. The actual feeling for it's really hard to explain, and it doesn't exactly feel like an emotion of sorts, but it just feels like something good. Not like happy or like this is the right thing to do, but just a sense of positive, no specific type of anything positive, just positive. For all I know, this could just be some form of OCD or something of the sort, but it still concerns me. Now, having this strong sense of do it, I also have the opposite where, when I go against what that feeling is telling me, it feels terribly, terribly wrong, almost as if though I just took part of something away from myself. It's like it's trying to show me what to do to get the certain end result that I should have to get where I need to be. I got that exact feeling at the exact time that the voice said that I was going to die. Assuming that I don't just chalk this up to me having some sort of illness or something wrong with me mentally, and that this really is something bigger or paranormal, I'd want to know what or who it is. God knows I have more than enough family members that have passed that it could be, although I feel like I have some sort of feeling of familiarity if that happens to be the case. It could also be some sort of thing to blame on this house. I lived here for almost 3 years now, and I still swear that it's cursed. I always feel like there's something or somebody here with me. Even when I'm alone, I still feel some sort of presence, which could also be a variation of the whole certain frequencies make you feel like you're being watched situations. My last, and to me, the one that I'm most drawn into, take as the solution is that something's just here with me. I had never once had sleep paralysis in my life until I moved to the house that I live in now. To make a long story short, the sleep paralysis was how everybody typically described it, with the heavy pressure and not being able to move or speak. But like many others, I had something staring at me. It was just peering at me from over my blankets, which had been mostly covering my face at the time. It had an oddly innocent yet somewhat unsettling sense to their presence. Of course, I was terrified to just see somebody staring at me in the darkness of my room, right on top of where I was in my bed with me, but I swear on it and feel like it's them that's been trying to help me with this, whatever there is to try and be accomplished with it. I get the same feeling thinking about it as I do when something tells me something's supposed to be done, or just states facts to me that I didn't exactly know just yet. Quite frankly, the situation scares me, and I'm beyond scared of what's going to happen when I'm 19. But it oddly gives me a sense of comfort knowing that something might be trying to watch over me and make sure things turn out okay. I haven't seen or had sleep paralysis since that one time. Maybe they don't want to scare me or just wanted to say that I'm here, but I just think that posting this here at least gives me some sense of, if something happens, people know what's happening. I don't know how I'm going to live the next 2 years of my life just knowing the situation even happened, but if somebody has anything to say, whether it's medical information about something similar to what's happening or any form of paranormal entities that happens to be similar to this, please say so. I'm scared and don't know how to really take any of this. Any sort of explanation helps. And if something happens to me in 2 years, you know that this has something to do with it. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/letsreadofficial, and give and receive feedback from the community, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And join my Discord to interact with me and other listeners directly. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt. Links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends, and ich bin ein Berliner.